So I'm actually glad to introduce the first speaker after launch, the first talk, Lucky. He is a very passionate software engineer and working in R&D team of a company called BBD. And he's actually joining us perhaps from South Africa, Johannesburg, if I'm not mistaken. And he is a game designer. Guess what? He's a game lover like me. So, hi, Lucky. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. And how are you?
I'm very good. So, you know that we are now waiting for your awesome talk. We want to see how you can fly a drone with a banana. I'm really excited for that. So
Okay.
I usually eat banana, but I never actually have a drone with banana flying. So really excited for this talk. A lot of probably exciting new APIs in the browsers, isn't it? Am I
Mhm.
correct?
Absolutely
Yeah,
correct.
that's fantastic. So without any hesitation, I will leave the stage and give the microphone to you and audiences. Please welcome Lucky.
Thank you very much. So I need to share my screen so that you can see my awesome slides. There we go. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, I'm guessing I'm in GMT +2, so it's afternoon here. It's about 2 o'clock, 2:30. If you're wondering who this person is, well, my name is Nhlanhla Nkosi, and I come from an awesome city called Johannesburg in South Africa. I'm actually talking to you live from Johannesburg right now. Now, here in Johannesburg, I work for this really awesome software development company called BBD, which was started about 36 years ago by three really bright individuals. Now, here at BBD, I work in a very unique team. We are called ATC, and we are charged with BBD's research and development functions. We do some specialized consulting, but I think probably the most interesting part of what we do, or the most rewarding rather, is that we are also charged with facilitating learning for BBD's 800 plus employees that are spread across multiple cities all over the world. I have a deep passion for learning and teaching, and to feed this passion, I'm also a lecturer at Wits University's Digital Arts department. I teach students from the Wits School of Art and the Wits School of Electrical and Information Engineering. In the little spare time that I do have, I am also a social cohesion advocate for our Department of Sports, Arts and Culture. And I also sit on the board of a public benefit organization, an NGO that's called the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. I've said a lot to introduce myself. The most important thing for all of you to know is that my Twitter handle is at @nlucky_Nkosi. Please feel free to tweet me and let me know what you think of this talk. Ask any questions, and I promise to answer all of them. Now, the talks that we had in the morning were absolutely incredible. And while all of these talks probably taught you some really cool and important stuff that probably will add a lot of meaning to your careers, this talk is going to be slightly different. I say this because in this talk, I'll mostly be talking about myself and some of the bad decisions that I've made over the past few months. Let's start with myself. A couple of years ago, I was diagnosed with an illness called narcolepsy. Now, narcolepsy is a sleep disorder that's characterized by excessive sleepiness, random sleepiness. You also get some sleep paralysis in some extreme cases. And around the same time, I was also diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. This sounds serious, but what it boils down for me personally is that when I'm in a setting, such as a conference, such as a lecture, or really boring meeting, I'm often in one of two states. The first, I'm usually struggling to fall asleep, and the other state is me getting distracted by the tiniest thing that I see or hear that I find interesting in that talk, conference, or meeting. So when I attended a friend and former colleague's talk, Gargana, she spoke about a lot of really, really cool, important, and interesting things. I can't really tell you what she spoke about. And that is because she had this one slide that caught my attention. Jerry spoke about how she flew a drone with Node.js and also crashed the drone with Node.js when she tried to show someone else. I immediately thought, wait a minute, how on earth did Jerry manage to fly a drone with Node? And if flying it with Node meant that you can crash your drone, or there's a great chance that you can crash your drone, I wonder how many other ways I can actually fly and crash my drone. And so, everyone, today I bring you 5 ways to kill a perfectly good drone by Nkosi. I'll start with another short story. One evening, on my way home from a company event, I was sitting in my Uber, and I've realized that I often do this now when I've had a few beers. I end up on this website that sells very, very cheap electronics. I'm talking about circuit boards, drones, and all sorts of cool electronics. And things are very, very cheap here. So I end up buying stuff that I don't actually need. Now, the interesting thing about this website is that because South Africa and Joburg is so far from Europe and the rest of the Western world, things usually take about 3 months to arrive here, unless you use some special courier service. So 3 months later, sitting at the office, a package arrives. There's a drone addressed to me. First, I was like, who on earth sent me a drone? Then I remembered that fateful night that I actually bought myself a drone. So now I found myself with a drone and no use for it. This is the drone that I bought online that night. It's called the SG900. Absolutely incredible drone. Quite big and makes quite a lot of noise. It comes with the remote control. It comes with a few extra parts, and it also has an HD camera attached to it. It can do a lot of cool things. But here in Joburg, I live in a city, very close to police stations, to national key points, to schools, all these things where I'm not allowed to fly a drone close to. So I actually didn't have much use for this drone. And so I decided that I'm actually just gonna go ahead and hack this drone. Why? Because why not? Like every great hacker knows, the first step to hacking is monitoring. Once you've monitored and you understand how the drone and all of its control schemes work, the next step is to try and mimic parts of this. Now, I come from a development background, from a game design background. I didn't know much about networking. So I walked around the office and I asked a few people for some direction as to how I can get started with this project. Always ask for help. I was pointed to an application called Wireshark. Now, Wireshark is a packet sniffing application that lets you essentially sniff the data traffic on some endpoint or on some device. This is what a Wireshark Trace looks like on the Windows application. I only ever used it there. And this might look a bit scary, but the part that is visible now, each line there is actually data that has been traced. And once you click on one of those, at the bottom of your screen, it then gives you the specific information about this. Now, this was really, really awesome, and it blew my mind that I could inspect network traffic. But what I was seeing, and this was because the drone exposes an unsecure Wi-Fi network, and even though you can control it with the controller that comes with the drone, you can also download an application. So I figured that I need to be able to recreate what that application does. But with Wireshark, I was actually sniffing data or traffic that was happening on the drone, which didn't really help me because I still didn't know how the actual application on the phone was sending this data. So to try and figure out what was happening on my phone, I found this application called T-Packet Capture. Now, this application, firstly, was great because I didn't have to root my phone. I used an Android device, and I could get this on the Google Play Store. Now, the cool thing here is that I could get actual traces of all of the data calls that are leaving my phone, which was perfect. I couldn't use this because as soon as the VPN is created, it would actually block all of the commands that went to the drone. So the only command I could actually trace and see was the connection command, not actually how to fly the drone. So this didn't help. But I did realize that this application is sending UDP packets to the drone. And using those UDP packets, that's how it was instructing the drone to fly in different ways. I sought advice from some people, as you always should, and I found out that because of how closely synced Apple devices are to each other, if you've got an iPhone and a MacBook Pro, you could actually trace the data that was leaving your mobile device far easier. I didn't have any of these devices, but a friend of mine, Matthew, had them. So I convinced Matthew that I just needed to trace what was happening on this one application. Needless to say, I saw some interesting things on Matthew's phone. But because I then decided that this is something I need to share with everyone, I would be speaking about this and flying this drone indoors rather. Because I care about your safety, if we were having this conference in person as we were meant to, I wouldn't want to hurt you. And because you're probably smarter, there is a better solution to this. See, I realized that I was going down a rabbit hole of learning about networking protocols when I actually just wanted to fly this drone. And so I did something better, which I think is probably smarter. I simply bought a better drone. When I say better, I particularly mean that it's a drone that's far easier to work with. And this is the drone that I came across. Did a bit of research, and I wanted a drone that was small enough to fly safely indoors so that I don't get into trouble with the authorities, but also so that I don't injure anyone that I try to show this to. Now, this drone is really, really awesome. It came with a Bluetooth-based controller. It's got an attachable camera to it, and it's got these VR goggles that you can slide your cell phone into and then actually see what's happening from the camera, which is awesome. But it also has accessories that you can actually attach to it, such as claws, so that I can go and grab my beer to get my next great idea, or even a cannon shooter, so that if I have an audience in front of me, I can shoot at them with my drone. Really, really useful things. So the Parrot Mambo mini drone was absolutely perfect for what I'm trying to do. This drone has two main means of communication, namely, it uses Bluetooth Low Energy and Wi-Fi. Now, with the first drone attempt, I'd used so much Wi-Fi technology and I'd learned so much about technology. I decided that here, because I want all of my projects to be learning experiences for me, I'm going to focus on Bluetooth Low Energy. Bluetooth sounds familiar, hopefully, to most of you. You remember these devices? When Bluetooth first came out, it was mostly used for wireless communication with your smartphone at the time. And the older people in the audience will remember that almost all of them, kept this thing attached to their faces, looking like their important business meetings their entire day. For people around my age, without exposing myself too much, we'd just come out of using infrared technology to share files between our cell phones. So even though we were using Bluetooth, we were still putting our cell phones together as if we actually needed that close contact. Now, Bluetooth Low Energy is slightly different from this traditional Bluetooth. And this Bluetooth, or the differences between BLE and traditional Bluetooth devices can be broken down into three main differences, namely power consumption. So Bluetooth Low Energy devices, how they work is that they send short amounts of data, or they transfer short amounts of data. Now, this can be breaking up the message into different packets and then sending it over this Bluetooth connection, while traditional Bluetooth devices would have been used for sort of continuous streaming of data. Now, this means that companies can run Bluetooth Low Energy devices for about 4 years without needing to change that battery supply. Now, this in turn starts influencing the applications that you would use these different technologies for. So Bluetooth Low Energy will be used in applications where you need intermittent data transfer. Think about your smartwatches, your heart rate monitors that have to sync with your phones. Bluetooth Low Energy is absolutely perfect for this, because then you can improve on battery life while sending the data that you need only when you need it. And the last major difference is that these new BLE devices can have up to 20 simultaneous connections. So that's 20 devices connected through some common node, one common node, whereas traditional devices could only deal with up to 7 devices. Now, these figures are affected by things such as hardware, such as the software that's running these things, such as your manufacturers. So there are a lot of variables that are at play here. But the big thing is that you can connect more devices with Bluetooth Low Energy. Now, I was introduced amazingly. That's probably one of the best introductions I've ever received. But one of the things that was said in my introduction was that I come from a game development background. Now, this means that Unity 3D is my hammer, and I hit absolutely everything with it. When I started working in corporate and working as a professional software engineer, all of my side projects were built with Unity. I could build an app, I could build a web app. No matter what I wanted to build, I would simply go for Unity, which is not necessarily the best thing to do. But ever since I've started playing with the web and started working with web development, I feel like I've gone through this transformation. And through this transformation, I feel like I've developed a new weapon, an X, if you will. And this X is JavaScript. And now I hit everything with JavaScript. This project was no different. When I told my friends that I want to fly a drone with my own code, people were like, okay, cool, seems doable. When I told them I want to do JavaScript, everyone told me to just stop. I didn't. So what does JavaScript have to offer us? There are 2 main libraries that we can get from NPM, and they're called Noble and Blino. My manager always says that the most difficult computer science problem is naming things. And developers have to name things a lot. And so even when we think we're creative, sometimes questionable. So Noble stands for Node Bluetooth Low Energy, and Blino stands for Bluetooth Low Energy for Node. Now, the name is reversed because these can be thought of as almost opposites of what they do. So Noble is used to build a central module that will then communicate with peripheral devices, such as your heart rate monitor, such as your drone, or any other device. And Blino is used to implement those peripherals. So if you're building your own heart rate monitor, you would use Blino to actually develop that and facilitate that communication via Bluetooth. Now, because we wanted something to talk to a device, i.e. our drone, means that for this project, I had to look at using Noble. Now that I know how I'm going to communicate with the drone, I needed to understand how the drone works. Now, I spent a very short time in the South African Air Force, and my knowledge of planes came in handy here. So there are 3 basic movements that we need to understand. The first is called a roll. Now, this is when a pilot basically tilts the plane one side and hopes that the wind will carry him or her where they need to go. A yaw is spinning almost flat. And a pitch is when a pilot just points the plane up or down and again hopes that the wind will direct the plane where it needs to go. But that's it. I now knew how to fly my drone. So at number 5, of 5 ways to kill a perfectly good drone, I give you Node.js. So I found documentation for this drone, and I discovered that to send commands to this drone, you need to send this XML structure informing the drone how to move in all of these different coordinates. So you would tell it how much yaw you want, how much roll, how much pitch you want, all in one XML thing. Now, considering how we fly drones, you don't just send one command and expect the drone to go there. You need to continuously send these commands. Now, this is a lot of XML to actually write up and send to a drone. But I have an X, JavaScript. JavaScript is your best friend. And this is particularly because it's got a good community of developers that share the work that we do. So I did what every single web developer does. Went on Google, tried to see if anyone has done this work so that I don't duplicate it and I can instead build on top of it. And then I found this script called Minidron Js. What it allowed me to do, or what it was rather, is a parser. What that means is that with that library, I could pass in those three strings, Minidrone, piloting, and takeoff, to specify which command XML I actually wanted. So this parser would then return that entire XML to me as a result. So I could then define takeoff and make takeoff that entire XML command. What this means is that with Node.js, I can simply fly this drone, or I can make this drone take off with only 10 lines of code. And as you can see on my screen, I say 10 lines inclusive of the decorative lines. So we actually have minimal code to connect and actually fly with this drone, which is absolutely incredible. But this is from Node. A friend of mine and former colleague, Mike Geza, recently gave a talk titled, "What Should the Web Do?" Mike is a brilliant web developer, one of the best I've met in my career. And Mike asked a fundamental question that all web developers need to constantly interrogate and think about. But while we as web developers think about this question and debate this question, our users already know what they want. They want the browser, they want the web to do absolutely everything, and they want those browsers to do everything now. So browser manufacturers have to come to the forefront. They have to build these features into these browsers so that web developers can deliver the features that our awesome users actually want. And that brings me to number four of ways to kill a perfectly good drone. And that's JavaScript straight from your browser. Now, if you've worked with JavaScript, you know that this is almost a sure way to kill a drone. What does this mean? Modern browsers, or one of my favorite features in the most modern browser ecosystem, is web Bluetooth. As a friend of mine once said, Nhlanhla, she says she loves Bluetooth so much. That's because Bluetooth is so imperfect. And yet it's so powerful and it connects everything around us. Now with web Bluetooth, we are now able to interface with devices like never before. We can now talk to cars, to cell phones, to watches, to other computers without needing any wired or tethered connection between all of these devices, which is absolutely perfect and incredible. So I decided that I'm going to fly this drone with JavaScript straight from our browser. Again, as every web developer, I went and I tried to find if anyone had done something similar to what I was trying to do. Then I found Peter O'Shaughnessy's GitHub repo, where he had done something similar to what I was going through, or to what I was trying to achieve. What I did here is that I found one particular script very useful. He called it Drone View 1.2, and this script essentially facilitated the connection using web Bluetooth to the drone. Now, this includes knowing things such as the GAT profile of the drone and how to get that profile, how to connect to it. So I took parts of his script, refactored it, put it into different classes to make it work better with what I was building and what I had. And with that, I created two new scripts. Drone connection management to facilitate this connection based on Peter's script. And then to abstract from that complexity, I also created a script that I called drone control. What this means is that straight from the browser, I can fly a drone by simply writing that. Once you've imported this drone control script, you can fly a drone using such simple commands. Drone.move left to move the drone left, drone.move right to make it move right, drone.flip to flip the drone again. And that's almost a sure way to fly your drone, or to kill your drone rather. And this is because web Bluetooth it's still new. So I found that it gets disconnected quite a bit. And then you might find that you've got your drone flying with no ways of actually connecting and of controlling it immediately. So at number 3, mimic other devices. One of my passions where technology is concerned is human-computer interaction. I believe that by continuously interrogating how we interface with computers, how we communicate with computers, when we think of a computer and how we interact with it, we often just think of the keyboard and the mouse. But there's so many different ways that we can facilitate this incredible experience of interaction. And by changing or challenging how we interact with these computers, we actually come about with new interesting experiences. And this is probably a passion that comes from game design, where I want to create new experiences. And I believe that the web is also a space where we need to start interrogating this. But there's a problem. Developers can't agree on anything. Is native better? Is web better? Should I be building a mobile device, a mobile application, or should I make this a progressive web app? Developers can't agree on the best way to do things because there's so many ways of doing them. In fact, I know for a fact that some users will be very upset if they find that they need to install an application that they'll only use once every 6 months. They'd much rather go for something like a website where you can do that. And even within the web ecosystem itself, web developers can't agree on the best way to do things. The answer, as I always say, is it depends. Depends on your application, depends on what it is that you're trying to achieve. But what this means is that the browser and the browser manufacturers have to deliver key features natively to the browser as early, as quickly as possible, so that web developers don't have to go into these debates and that we can build uniform things that will always work across all of these devices. In comes in the W3C. Now, their mission is to lead the web to its fullest potential. And they aim to do this by developing web standards that browser manufacturers, such as Google and Mozilla and Microsoft, then follow these standards to ensure that we as developers have somewhat a streamlined experience, regardless of what our users' devices are. Now, the Mozilla Web Docs are generally a very good source of truth when it comes to the standards and the availability of features on the browser. And when you go to their website, you can see the web APIs that are available. Ones that are experimental will be indicated as such. Some browsers, like the Chrome browser, even before a standard is concretized, they will go and develop that feature into the browser, maybe put it under the experimental flag, so that you know as a developer that this might actually be discontinued. So this is a good place to see what is available on the web. But this also here, something here caught my attention. And what caught my attention was something called the Sensors API. Now, this gives you access to your device's gyroscope, proximity sensors, ambient line sensor, and even your accelerometer. And I realized that I could then use this to fly my drone. To use the accelerometer, you literally just new up a new accelerometer with new accelerometer. So let sensor or const. To start reading, sensor.start. Can't read forever. So to stop, simply write sensor.stop. And if you want to use the data that's coming in from the sensor, you simply have to add an event listener to the reading event, and then you can implement your code there. What this means is that I can make my drone follow the movements of my phone. I'll show you what this looks like. One of the key features that the modern browser has to implement or has to create is a good developer experience. And part of that is allowing developers to be able to debug their code. Chrome does this particularly well. So with Chrome, if you forward your port and you put your Android device in debug mode, you can actually inspect what's happening in your phone. So as I move my phone, I can see that the accelerometer values that I get from my device are represented as X, Y, and Z. So I used those values to try and map my phone's movement directly to my drone's movement. So this is what that looks like. When I tilt my phone up, the drone takes off. When I tilt my phone forward, the drone flies forward. When I put my phone back to the resting position, the phone lands. As you can see, that's almost a sure way of breaking your drone. So, number 2, no hands. Flying a drone with gestures, without any peripherals connected to your hand. One of the things that the browser has always been critiqued for is the sandbox that it has. So the fact that on a mobile device, a browser before couldn't have access to the security store, it couldn't on your laptops, connecting to USB devices was quite difficult, but modern browsers have actually solved this problem, which means that using the leap motion sensor, which actually maps out almost the joints in your hands using a specialized camera, using this leap motion sensor, I can then try and fly my drone with hand gestures. So again, I picked up the positions of these different gestures and I mapped them to different movements of the drone. So this is what this looks like. I put my hand over the camera, and as I tilt my by hand, the drone then starts doing movements that follow that. So you can see that I can even start rotating the drone as opposed to the sort of basic movements that I was doing before. Now, this allows us to create really, really meaningful and exciting experiences for all of our users in the web ecosystem. I spoke about my passion for education. One of the biggest driving forces for this is that I have a 10-year-old brother. He turned 10 last week. And I realized that in order to engage very young children into learning and making them excited about learning about tech, we need to make the technology sensible and accessible to them. And so at number one, the most stressful of all of the ways to kill a drone. You can try to fly your drone with a banana. Let me explain. So I'm gonna have I have a demo in front of me, and I'm hoping that our producer will put me full screen right now so that I can show this to you. So what we have now is I've got fruits over here, and I hope you can see my fruits. Let me just zoom my camera out a bit so that you can see what it is that I'm doing. There we go. Let's just turn my camera down. There we go. Right. Okay, so on my desk, I've got a few things apart from my laptop. So I've got fruits, as you can see, and I've got our beautiful Mambo mini drone over here. Now, because now we can interface with USB devices, I've got a tiny device sitting here on my desk that I don't want to disturb too much, and this is called a makey. Now, the makey allows you to almost create your own keyboard using custom controllers. I recently published an article about how you can build your own version using the cheapest Arduino on the market and how you can do this yourself. But today we're going to use the makey. Now, how this works is that there is a ground pin that I've connected this orange to. Glad you can see my orange. And you can see that there is a wire connected to it that goes straight into my makey board. And then how it works is that the human body is very conductive, not very. It's not the best conductor, but it's conductive nonetheless. So by closing the circuit between a pin and ground, so that's called creating an active low system. So based on an active low system, if I create a closed path from one of the pins to the ground pin, using the software, we can pick up that the voltage reading on this pin has dropped significantly, which means that we are almost going to ground. And using that logic, we can then assume that that pin is being touched. Now, most organic material is actually conductive. That's because they're also made up of water, a significant amount of water, and that's one of the properties that make them conductive. This includes myself as a human, it includes this banana, and so what I'm going to do is that by simply plugging in this banana, you can see I've now connected it to this wire. I've written a very simple piece of software. Just going to open it up in my browser. And in my browser, all I have is code to, I've got two buttons. The first is to connect to the drone so that I can start sending signals to it. The second one is to make the drone take off. Once it's taken off, I will then try to fly this drone straight from my control scheme over here. I think you can see the drone there. Now I'm just going to connect these bananas As you can see, these are real bananas. I'm not lying to you, I promise. And all I have to do is plug in a conductive piece, which is a piece of exposed wire, to all of this. So I've made the orange to be my ground piece. So when I touch the first one, the drone should move left. When I touch the furthest one on my right, the drone should move right. When I touch the middle one, maybe a surprise. So let's see. May the demo gods be in my favor. So right now, I'm just refreshing my browser, connecting to my drone. If you can see my drone in front, the green will now go solid. There we go. And then now we take off. And now we've got the drone flying in mid-air. I'm going to bring it down quickly, just so that we can see it. And then I'm going to take it off from a lower height. So just refresh that, connect to the drone. There we go. And take off. And there we go. We've got our drone. So now when I touch this side, you'll see that the drone moves towards me and tries to kill me. Ooh, I just broke the drone. But as you saw, that when I touched this drone, when I touched this banana, the drone moved to the left. Touching this one would have moved the drone to the right. And then the center one would have actually made the drone backflip. Now I've just broke off the propeller, which exactly proves the point of this talk, that this is a sure way of breaking your drone. So with that said, a lot of people ask me why I do this. It's really, really pretty simple. By doing this, I learn. I learn JavaScript. I learn all of these new cool features. When you learn or when you play, you learn. And learning is such a critical part of what we do as professional engineers. So keep playing, keep learning, and keep playing with your food. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lucky. This was amazing.
Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed it. Like, I was sitting like this and said, oh, is it going to break the drone? And you did it. You broke it. I think that was a successful talk. Thank you. So, amazing talk. So I really enjoyed. I see that many people are also enjoying that. So they writing comments right now. Wonderful and great anyway. And you know, it was amazing. Very nice. But we've got some questions. But before that, let me tell you the audiences right now who are watching us. So I know that in the morning, perhaps you've seen or you have heard these sentences that if you have a question, please write it in the chat. But please do. And don't be shy. And let us just ask this question from our awesome speakers. So,
Yes,
Lucky, are you ready for some questions? Some fun ones, some difficult, and maybe some of the easy ones. The first one is that, like, the question is, where do you see such a technology being used in a practical terms? Like, do you have any experience with that, or do you see that?
I think
maybe in the
first
future.
one is something that I touched on very briefly, and that is making education accessible. So when I studied game design, I was the only Black student in my degree, which made it difficult because when other students talk about their experiences and use examples for games, these are games that I have absolutely no idea of. So by using things such as fruits and using things that we can all see and interact with, you're making that educational material accessible to every single person. So the first one is making education accessible. And the second place where I see this kind of technology used is in therapy, physiotherapy, because creating that sensation of touch, that sensation of dexterity, and being able to program what people or to create code based on what people can feel, see, and touch makes what we build that much more real.
Okay, very good. Another question for you right now is that what is the browser compatibility of these APIs right now? For instance, I see that you are using Sensor API, and sensor API is still under the flag, if I'm not mistaken. So can you give us
Yeah,
some hints
so
about
when I
that?
first started using the Sensors API, which is about almost a year ago, it was under the flag, but I've moved on to a new computer sense and I didn't have to activate that flag. So I think the Sensors API is actually readily available in Chrome. I stand to be corrected there. But yeah, I think as with most standards, the more people actually use the features, the more likely they are to be standardized and the more likely that they are to be implemented in other browsers. So if you want to play around with it, I know it's readily available in Chrome. I'm not too sure about the other browsers.
I see. Okay. So one funny question. If you want to become an API, one of these APIs that probably you used, which one do you like to be?
The Fetch API. I'd say the Fetch API, yeah, because the Fetch
The
API
Fetch API.
is becoming an integral part of almost all of the applications that we're building. I mean, most of what we do is work with data. So being such a critical a part of any mission is absolutely incredible. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So what? One last question for you is that what is the most exciting API that you worked maybe in the browser
Definitely
so far?
the Sensors API, because it is such a mind-blowing thing that your device is generating all of this data. It's picking up all of this information around you, and you know, data and information is such a powerful thing in the modern day. And the fact that you can just collect this data, and we're all walking around with these devices in our pockets every single day, and they're sharing data, they're collecting data.
Yes.
So I think this is probably the most exciting one out of all of them.
Yes. Fantastic. Again, thank you very much. One last, this is my personal question. Have you heard about virtual high five?
Virtual high five? No, I have not.
No. Then high five like that.
High five.
You nailed it, man. You nailed it. Thank you very much for today. So I'll say goodbye and see you next time, hopefully in person somewhere in some of the conferences. Take care of yourself.